Welcome back to the Holistic Health Bites podcast. Today, we're talking about the Glucose-Ketone Index, or the GKI. This sounds like a complicated term, but really, it's just a simple formula that tracks the ratio of your blood sugar, glucose, to your blood ketones. This is an important biomarker of metabolic health that is easily tracked at home. Adequate levels of glucose in the blood is vital to health. Both too little and too much are problematic for your cells, tissues, proteins, cell signaling, and, your overall energy production. Too little blood sugar means that your cells are lacking fuel to function. Too much blood sugar means that your proteins and your cell membranes become sticky and they just don't work as well. This creates inflammation, which further contributes to damage and lower available energy. Many people take this idea that we need adequate blood sugar to mean that we need to eat carbohydrates to keep our blood sugar levels up. But that isn't actually true. The body has the capacity to produce glucose from non-carbohydrate sources, namely fat, protein, lactate, and other sugars like fructose. This means there are no essential carbohydrates. In health, essential means we must consume it because we need it, but we can't make it. Thanks to the process of gluconeogenesis, or the creation of new glucose, we don't have to consume any glucose. And it's true that all of our cells can run on glucose, and some need more than others. It is also true that we can generate energy from non-glucose substrates, such as fatty acids and ketones. Fatty acids are derived from our diet, and our bodies can make them. What drives this is both hormones and the body's energy needs. When we consume foods, our bodies respond with various hormones and enzymes. One of the major hormones released is insulin. Insulin is a growth and storage hormone. We've talked about it on many other episodes on this show. Insulin is a hormone of the fed state, meaning it's at its highest when we're eating and following food consumption. It's at its lowest when we're fasted. Insulin plays many roles in the body. One of its most famous roles is to open the door into certain types of cells, allowing glucose in. This lowers the blood sugar because the glucose is now inside the cell, not in the blood. Insulin doesn't just open the door, though. It also tells the cell what to do with that energy. It tells it to convert it into something that can be stored for later use. Most of the cells in the body can readily take up glucose without insulin when energy is needed. Insulin is there because there is excess fuel that isn't needed right now. This tells the cells to convert that incoming energy to glycogen, or long chains of glucose strung together, or fat. We can only store so much glycogen, though, so most of it gets converted to fat. So insulin is telling the cells that we have ample fuel available, so we don't need to be breaking down stored fuels. It does this by blocking the enzyme necessary to release fat from storage. It makes sense, right? We don't want to be filling our stores while also emptying them. This means, however, that when insulin is high, you cannot burn fat or lose weight. You have to be bringing down insulin first. We do that by reducing our consumption of the foods that spike insulin the highest, reducing the overall intake of foods, and by not eating as often. The foods that spike blood sugar and insulin the most are refined and simple carbohydrates. All carbs spike glucose more than fats and proteins, but the simple and refined carbs go in quickly. Complex carbohydrates digest slower, but do still cause a moderate to large spike. Remember, there are no essential carbohydrates, so the biggest impact will be to reduce all carbs. Eating in excess, even zero carb eating, will still keep insulin levels higher because that is a signal that we are in a time of feasting and storing for times of famine. Insulin raises to pack on the pounds for those times of famine. And eating often also means insulin never has an opportunity to drop to lower levels. Even if you're eating an adequate amount of food, keeping blood sugar levels in check, eating every couple of hours is preventing you from breaking down stored fuels for energy. When glucose and insulin levels come down to ideal levels, your body can start using stored fuels and creating alternative fuels to run on. One of the most important fuels here is ketones. Ketones are produced in the liver from the body or dietary fats. The ketones are available because nearly every cell in the body can run on them. Only red blood cells cannot because they don't have a nucleus, and therefore they don't have mitochondria. They are also water soluble, so they can freely float in the blood without a carrier protein. Fatty acids cannot freely float in the blood because they're hydrophobic. Think oil and water. They don't mix very well. Ketones are also much smaller, so they can cross the blood-brain barrier to fuel the brain. In fact, the brain, heart, and muscle tissues seem to prefer to run on ketones. In the presence of both glucose and ketones, the ketones are readily used up first. They take metabolic priority. Okay, so now you know about glucose and ketones. How do you use this information to improve your metabolism, achieve ideal weight, and boost your energy naturally? You test. My favorite way to test this is with an at-home glucose-ketone meter, KetoMojo. This device is a blood meter that uses a small drop of blood to test on 2 different strips, one for glucose and one for ketones. Now, ideal numbers are as follows. In a fasted state, we want glucose to be 70 to 90 milligrams per deciliter in the US for most people. There are some clinical applications where we might want different numbers, but this is a good rule of thumb for most people. We want ketones to be at least 0.5 millimole per liter or higher. Most of us don't really need to worry about our ketones getting too high unless you have type 1 diabetes, are on certain types of medications, do extended fasting, or you have some other metabolic condition that increases your ketone production. A value of 0.5 millimole per liter is considered to be in nutritional ketosis. When should you test? I recommend testing about an hour or 2 after rising in the morning, but before you've eaten anything. You can also wait until right before your first meal, depending on when that is. Activities, stressors, exercise, and other factors can contribute to changes in your readings, so you definitely want to take into account anything you've done the morning of those readings. You can also check later in the day before consuming lunch or dinner to see how quickly you're getting back into ketosis after specific foods. This should be generally about 3 hours after eating. Getting back to the GKI. This formula takes into account both glucose and ketone readings to evaluate your metabolic health at the moment. It is calculated by taking the glucose reading in milligrams per deciliter, dividing that number by 18, and then dividing that number by the ketone reading in millimole per liter. Now, if you happen to be in another country or using a meter where you're directly measuring your glucose in millimole per liter, then you can simply just divide your glucose by your ketones. So what does your GKI level mean? A GKI of 9 or higher means that you are not in ketosis at all. This can be due to high glucose, low or absent ketones, or both. A GKI of 6 to 9 means you are in a low level of ketosis, which is great for health maintenance and weight loss. A GKI of 3 to 6 means that you are in a moderate level of ketosis, which is great for reversing type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance, losing weight, and improving overall hormone function. A GKI of 1 to 3 is a high level of therapeutic ketosis. This level is usually really only necessary for the treatment of specific diseases like epilepsy, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease. traumatic brain injury, chronic inflammatory diseases, and serious mental health disorders. A GKI of less than 1 is generally not recommended or really even possible without medical intervention. If you're testing and you're not getting the numbers you'd like to see, here are a few things you can do. First, be patient. These changes don't happen overnight. Stick with your process to see the changes. Second, if your glucose is elevated, then look at your current carb intake. Many people, especially those with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, obesity, or other metabolic conditions, may need to drop to 20 to 50 grams of carbohydrates per day, or even less, to see blood sugar levels come down. If your carbs are already reduced, then take a look at your overall intake, both quality and quantity, to make sure you're not over-consuming food. Even things like non-calorie sweeteners can be problematic for some people. If you're consuming quality foods and an appropriate amount, then look at how often you're eating. Number 3, try intermittent fasting, eating less often or changing up the timing of your meals to maximize how long you've been in a fasted state when you test. Number 4, look at other interferences: stress, poor sleep, toxins, medications, supplements, too much or too little exercise, and the things you're doing before you test. If your glucose is good, but your ketones are non-existent or lower than you'd like, look at all of those same factors. Be patient. Look at the foods you're consuming. Look at your eating schedule. Look at your overall lifestyle. Most of the time, this simply takes more time than you've given it. Your insulin levels will come down and your ketones will go up. If you are exceptionally lean, you might not have enough stored body fat to make significant amounts of ketones. That's okay. You don't actually need to make them for your current health condition. Simply ensure that you're eating adequately to prevent additional weight loss and that your blood sugars are at healthy levels. There you have it, the Glucose-Ketone Index. If you found this information as valuable as I have and you want to test for yourself, I have 2 recommendations. Number 1, click the link in the show notes to get your own Keto Mojo device with a $20 savings. Number 2, you can enter to win a Keto Mojo meter bundle. This offer is only going out to my podcast audience. In this bundle, you'll get the meter and 70 of each test strip so that you can test your own GKI at home. Click the Enter to Win link in the show notes to enter to win this prize. Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Until next time, be well and vibrant.